Hello.
Hey, yo.
How are you? Great to meet you again.
Yeah, man. Let's do this. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, that is going to be really fun. And by the way, I don't know if someone is already connected. Let's just start. And one thing that we are just two, so if there are any questions in the chat, we will check it later because we will start the conversation, and then when we are midway or almost by the end, we check if they have some comments, and then we answer, and if not, we go on. Okay, so by the way, this is really, really fun because it's the first time that I'm going to do this, and it was more than an experiment. It was an excuse to talk with you again live after a few months, and I'm really excited of having this conversation. And you, PJ, are one of the greatest inspiration that I have for my work, for communicating, for doing the visual. And I would love to let you just introduce you 1 minute, and then we dive in.
Okay, thank you. First off, thank you for that lovely comment. I really appreciate that. I think we both have mutual respect for each other. I don't know if I can keep it under a minute. My students will tell me I'm a little bit verbose, but yeah. So I'm PJ Milani, Pejman Milani, aka Milani Creative, on Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, so about a couple years ago, I started creating visuals to explain ideas, specifically visual metaphors is the thing I really love kind of doing because I just wanted to use a way to communicate all these ideas that we have in our heads and present them in a way that is really easily digestible. And oh, there we go. We got some recording going on. And
Yeah.
yeah, so and by doing that, it opened up these doors of serendipity to be able to connect with folks like yourself and other visual creators and writers online. And yeah, so I've just been kind of riding that wave. So essentially, I think both of us really strive to simplify complexity through the visuals that we create and present them in a way that other people will be able to kind of remember them and find them to resonate with them long term. And yeah, so that's kind of like the mission, I suppose. And like an underlying mission underneath that for me personally is to encourage people to have a daily creative practice because I just think that is good for the soul. So yeah.
Wow. Thank you. This is really interesting. And yeah, and actually like the final purpose of doing all the visuals, this is something like looks like it's unique to each one of us. No?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone does it for a reason. And actually I'm really curious to hear is what brought you to start this?
Mm.
Because I remember that you have already a background on teaching and doing creative things. And what brought you to just triggered you to start publishing visual illustration online?
Yeah, so it's funny. I think if I take it a step further back, I started with writing, and I
Ah,
started writing online first. And I started writing because initially I wanted to do YouTube. I thought, oh, YouTube would be really cool because I teach film and animation as my background, and this is my 20th year teaching. And one of the things my students always ask me is like, hey, what are you working on, Mr. Milani? And I'm like, I have no time to work on anything other than to teach you guys and, all that. But over time, I started realizing, it's this thing that I kept going back to was a desire that I had. And, you talk about imposter syndrome. Like if you've been teaching in your 20th year and you haven't been creating consistently and up to that point, it feels really maybe detached from the creative experience if you're not continuously creating for yourself as well as a teacher, at least for me, especially as an art teacher, encouraging students to do art.
mm,
So I was writing in my journal, I'm 41, I'm writing in my journal, yeah, I really should start, doing something with YouTube or start creating online or whatnot. And I started having like this deja vu. I was like, wait a minute. So, I have a bunch of journals like that I write in. Um, I'll show you a few of them. This is just maybe like a few of them. I probably have like another 6 down here. So I started flipping through another one because I had deja vu, and I found an entry that I had written at 31, 10 years before, saying
wow.
the exact same thing. And I was like, oh no. Oh
10
crap.
years.
Like I was like, if I don't at this point, if I don't do something, I'm 41. If I don't do anything at this point, then I'm never going to do it. I might as well either just stop saying it or do it. And so I decided to start by writing online. And then as I started writing online, I realized, oh, well, one of the things that you can also do to express yourself is to create visuals. And I present ideas through presentations in class all the time. And I use metaphors to explain ideas to my students all the time. And I normally hear like, hey, that's a really good metaphor. Or, you know, in like meetings or in with students. And I started thinking, wait, could we combine these things? And let me try that. And so by starting to share some work, started to get more internal validation. External validation, which encouraged my internal motivation. It's something that Lawrence Yeo talks about a lot. If you're familiar with him, he's the author of More to That. And he continuously kind of talks about this like balance of, you know, how motivated you are personally, and then getting some level of external validation to kind of continue to like build off of each other. And that kind of like got the flywheel going, if you will, and kind of kept doing it. And you know, fast forward, you know, Adam Grant ends up like using one of my visuals, and I was like, oh my god, Adam Grant, I have his books in my bookshelf. I had one on my desk, and when I saw that, I was like, how is that even possible? I didn't know him. And then, you know, messaging him and being able to have like some kind of interaction with somebody that you admire and you love their thinking, seeing that those doors open was a huge amount of external validation and allowed me to, again, continue to do the work. And so, yeah, that's kind of like how I got started. Not very short, but that's essentially the gist of it.
Absolutely amazing. And when you say that, there is something that, by the way, there are so many things in common with my experience. And one thing that I just thought when you said that is that, for example, in coaching, we say that we cannot take the coachee where we have not been. So what you said that, okay, you are teaching creative, at the same time, you connect better with your students and with all the things if you do the same. So this is one way to put it, and it's common to various types of work, as I see. And one thing that also is amazing, that you say, okay, it was 31 and 10 years looks like an eternity. But at the same time, if we look back, when you started doing visuals, what was that, 2 years ago, 2 years and a half?
About 2 years ago.
And I remember that there is one image that I still remember, perhaps you also remember, when you started on LinkedIn, and I was amazed that you were already doing a lot of stuff, amazing stuff in Twitter and Instagram. And LinkedIn was not yet one of the main platform. And now, by the way, I'm a very, very big believer in LinkedIn. I feel the most meaningful connection, the deeper conversation are here. So I'm very, very positive on that. And I remember one day that I saw one of your posts, which was, by the way, was a carousel from more than 1 year ago. And from one day to the other, I remember that. And it was like, boom, in one day. And I remember you have like, you were talking about external validation. Exactly. And I see that you didn't care on one side. And at the same time, you had, what was that, 20 or 10,000 followers. And from this single one, you went from 10 to 60. It was like, boom. And I said, that's when we say about you have to put the work for 1 or more year, and then you see the result. You don't do it for the results. You just do it because you like it. And then, okay, perhaps someone, whatever happened, Mr. Algorithm likes your post or whatever, and then people say, oh, this is really great work. And this is exactly what you were talking about, the external validation on one side, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be the only reason, because if not, first, you're not going to have fun, and second, it's not going to work because you're doing this for other reasons. So I think that we can see that what you do, you really like it. So
Yeah.
all the effort that you put in the message and how to craft it in a novel way is very, very, it's amazing. And now I would like to also to ask you, besides this, what's your biggest challenge at the moment?
Mm.
Dealing with all this creative process and what are you doing? What's the biggest challenge that you have?
Biggest challenge is, going back to just earlier what you were saying, is it's very much that hockey stick graph in these kinds of pursuits, and where you're starting out and it's like this, and it just kind of picks up, and it's everything everywhere all at once. It picks up, and that is something that you it's a byproduct of doing the day-to-day work. It's not the goal. It's a side effect, as essentially. And I think the challenge right now is having it's a challenge that everyone has, which is, how do you allocate the time in a way that you have towards the things that are most meaningful. And not only, like, you could think of it in more analytical business terms, you can think of it as more intangible creative terms. Depending on your goal, what you're optimizing for, it's identifying what is the thing that is going to be your core, and then kind of radiating out from there. So I think that has been the challenge right now, because you can, as you do more and more, as you share more and more of your work, you start to realize that there are opportunities everywhere.
Yeah.
But that's where you can kind of suffer from the shiny object syndrome, and trying to figure out, okay, well, is this a shiny object syndrome, or is this an opportunity? You have to kind of have a strong decision framework to say, I should do this, or I should not do this right now, because I'm trying to focus on what I was already working on. And right now for me, the most meaningful thing has been the course that I've been teaching, and helping others kind of learn this stuff, and encouraging people. Again, like, one of the core tenets of the course I'm teaching is, hey, at the end of it, I'm like saying the most important thing is to have a daily creative practice. Don't put all your eggs in one basket trying to make a singular visual and then one day post it. It's like, just day to day, get the reps in. It's like your physical body, you need to get the physical reps in to get stronger. The same with your creative muscles. You need to get those reps in, and you need to get the full rep in order to get the full strength. If you're constantly just doing a single rep, but you're focusing earlier on in the rep, just trying to get it perfect, you're never going to get those full reps and get the full, like, strength of things. So I think for me right now, the challenge is trying to stay focused on what it is I'm working on, making sure it's meaningful and it aligns with everything else that is the core, I guess, mission, if you will, of me personally. And sticking to kind of that. Engagement is really hard as well. I don't know if you're very system based, which is one of the things I admire about you. I'm like, how does this guy, he is a freaking machine. Like, you are just consistently, I think of you as probably the most prolific visual creator on LinkedIn, in that you constantly are putting out work, and it's all different and new and interesting. So I think that part of it is something I would probably struggle with, is you write like really long captions. I write like a single sentence, and I'm like, what do I say for this sentence? And you're like, you have like this like giant caption every day, and I'm like, man, how does this guy do it? So I think I know I'm jumping all over the place, but those are kind of like the stuff that I'm trying to, I guess, manage in a more and maybe ambient kind of way. Yeah. What about you?
Well, again, there is a lot of overlap what you say. And if I had to say my biggest challenge is something similar of yours, because as you say, there are so many opportunities, so many interesting things. How can you decide if this is the right one, if we are missing out, the FOMO all over the place? So my strategy for that is just to have 2 or 3 projects at the same time, no more than 3. Now it's coaching, visual illustration and communication, and learning how to use AI and all these things, which I think it's really, really fun and it's very interesting. And then one of the other strategies is just to take a little dips in various direction, at least to know what was there and write it down. And then, okay, now it's not the moment, but perhaps in the future it will be. And one thing that you said about the muscle, which, by the way, it's a very good metaphor. I thought that there is another metaphor. You know, when we both are parents, when we were expecting our children, perhaps we saw pregnant women everywhere.
Yeah.
It's classic. And
Yeah.
it's the same with the creative process. Once you are in the mindset and you have the habit and you are looking for these things, the things pop out. And you asked me, how do I am so prolific, let's say. It's just probably the habit of looking into the second derivative, let's say. And when I see something, for example, I see something of yours, there is an amazing video that you did on how you did the paper boat and the paper below the surface, which was an alternative to the iceberg metaphor. I just capture the screenshot and I say, oh, I want to do something similar. And then I put it in the backlog, don't think about it. And then perhaps at any moment, when I'm reading or writing something, comes to mind. So it's just the idea of having so many things in the backlog that then when you want to write or want to do something, it feels effortless, or at least it doesn't feel like a chore, which is one of the big secrets for me. It never has to look like, oh, I have to do this, because then it takes out all the fun, all the interesting things, and then it's not worth anymore. But you mentioned your course, and I'm really curious. By the way, if you want to say something more of the course, I'm sure it's amazing. But what I would like to hear from you is what the biggest satisfaction that you have after doing the second cohort of your visual course.
Yeah. Gosh, there's so many different things. I think part of it was the very first, and maybe I can share this in a couple stories here, but the first, I can tell you the very first course, the first beta, I ran the beta like in September of the course, and the very first live session, I was so happy. I was so happy. Like I just, I was terrified. I was not sure if my technology was going to work. I had never run a Zoom breakout room. I had, you know, we use Teams at school, so we don't use Zoom. You know, I hadn't accepted people in the middle of a presentation. Like there were so many little details that I had never done. So I was terrified, and I hadn't even gone through the presentation all the way through once. And so I was horrified and terrified, but at the same time, my face was just so alive with joy, because I had been wanting to teach this stuff for about 1.5 years. Like from the very beginning, as I started thinking about, oh, like, how would I teach this stuff? And so I had been thinking about it for like 18 months, maybe plus that. I've been thinking about, okay, what kinds of processes and systems can we put into learning this stuff? Because oftentimes when we teach something, we have to break down what feels intuitive into repeatable, reliable tools. And I think in that experience where I was just like so happy, and I remember messaging Michael J. Borman and Hannah Wilsons, because we're all buddies. We message each other pretty regularly to keep in touch. And I had messaged Michael immediately after, and I was like, because he had asked how it went, and I was like, man, I feel like I was born for this. It just felt so right. And I mean, I've always loved teaching. I've loved teaching creative stuff in general, and teaching film and teaching animation.
Yeah.
And and I get a lot of fulfillment from that. And I've never wanted to quit my 9 to 5. Like I just love teaching, and seeing the aha moments in students, and seeing those, oh, I love these little seeing those like moments where they realize something that they didn't know before. Those are just like the moments I live for. And I think if I was to sum up maybe like what's been the most fulfilling thing, is seeing that in adults is different than seeing it in high school students. I think there's value in both. With high school, it's like you're paving the road for their future. And I always kind of equate teaching high school like reading a really good book, but not knowing the ending. You'll never know the ending unless they message you one day and say, hey, this is how I'm applying the things that you taught me. And sometimes you get that. With teaching adults, it's like a relationship that can continue after you've taught the course, and you're able to see how they're applying things that you taught them. So I think there's a lot of that. Like the course just finished yesterday, for instance, and it just gave me a really bright smile this morning. One of the students from the course, Han, she posted on LinkedIn her first visuals that she's sharing with the world, and she was great. Like in the course, like she was really focused, and she like did everything in the course, and it was just like I just love seeing that. And so I think overall, again, I'm sorry, I'm not very tight on my answers here, but I think overall it's seeing those aha moments, and then recognizing how much joy I get from the practice of doing it. It's like another form of iteration in your practice. Like we iterate on visuals, but being able to iterate on teaching rapidly is also really fulfilling, because you're starting to see, oh, this is where this might also help. This might also help. This might also help. And so that you start integrating all those different things into the course. Yeah. So that's the kind of long gist of it.
That's super interesting. And I can see, by the way, that the classic thing that it's not the same what you know until you have to teach it. So the fact that you have to teach it and write it and put it out and all the technology, whatever, I have to do that. So it puts you, I think it puts you on another level, and you have to work extra hard and to internalize much more. And this is what it's clear. And by the way, I can really feel your enthusiasm, your passion for what you do, and the satisfaction of seeing the creativity in other people, and also that there is no need to be to have a degree in design or whatever. It's something that every one of us has. It's just a creative part. Then you give shape to an idea, and the fact of bringing out what comes to me is bring out the creative part of each of us has really some similarities to the coaching process, because what I'm doing now, my certification as a coach, and one of the pillars of the model is that we believe, and I absolutely believe that people are naturally creative, full of resources, and whole. And this is exactly the philosophy that you have behind your course, because if you didn't believe that, you wouldn't do that. And when you say that with adults, it's probably there is no difference between an adult and a child, because we both have the creative part. We just have to bring it out, and it's not so easy, perhaps, or it's not a habit anymore for adults. For kids, it's just okay. I do that.
Yeah, exactly. They just kind of jump into the playground to play.
Exactly.
Because you have to encourage an adult.
Exactly.
No, you should play too. You might have fun playing within the playground as well. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that, because one of the students I had, he, after we have Q&A sessions after each live session, and in the Q&A session, he talked about how he has done like video editing, and he works with clients all the time, but he never considered himself someone who could do creative work this way. And the fact that the door opened up for him to be able to do that, and he starts to believe that and starts to see that it's possible, was like really joyful for him. And again, that is like, you can't put a price on those kinds of realizations. It's just so fulfilling. And yeah, I think like what you said is identifying the fact that you can do creative work, and it's not, there's no like degree for it. Everyone is potentially possible. I think back in the elephant in the room that I addressed early on is drawing is not the same as visual thinking. Like they are connected.
Yeah.
But look at Alex Hormozi. Alex Hormozi, business guru of sorts. His visuals, he creates himself, and they have so much character. He has the money to hire someone if he wanted to. He's got $130+ million ready to go if he ever wanted to hire someone. He pays $120,000 a month to be on social media. He has all these social media managers. He could pay someone to make the visuals, but he makes them himself, and they're not pristine art, but they communicate really strong ideas. And that is where I want to encourage people to kind of say, look, it doesn't have to be accurate. Your art doesn't have to be precise. It has to be interesting. And there's a difference with all that. And I like to say it's not about making things pretty. It's about making things pithy. So.
Yeah, that's great. Super interesting. And by the way, now that you said that, I would like to check if there are any questions in the chat so we can answer. And if not, I have one more question that just popped out. Let's see. I don't see questions. If there are, I'm looking in the wrong place. So sorry if I'm missing questions. We will check that in the end. But my question would be, how do you see, there is one thing, let's first say, there is one thing that you mentioned about the relationship, which I also believe it's one of the basis of all we do in social media, communication, etc. How do you see this in the coming months and years with all this interaction, AI and all the other stuff? What's your vision?
Let me see if I understand the question. So you mean like relationships with people and how, or are we talking about relationships with AI and technology, or?
Yeah, what place does AI have in all this relationship, and how can we manage it in a way that it can help us perhaps, or whatever? What's your vision?
So I don't think I have the expertise to offer too much insight into how AI would play a strong role in like the relationships between people. But I would say, as far as a relationship that we have with AI, as we use it as a tool for creative expression, it's a bit tricky one, because part of what makes us stronger as creatives is going through the full rep again, the full muscular rep. And what AI has the potential to do is to eliminate some of that physical exertion. Think of it as mental exertion. And you may even hear from a lot of AI gurus and even writers, hey, get AI to do the thinking for you and do the brainstorming for you so that you can focus on the act of writing or the act of drawing or whatever. And I think that's a slippery slope. And I'm not a purist in the sense that you shouldn't use AI, but it is to be mindful in how we're using it and eyes wide open so that you're not blindsided, where you're thinking about, if you're using it as a thinking or brainstorming tool, what are we losing by not recording things, for instance, like you said earlier, you grab a screenshot of one of my visuals as inspiration, and that starts to create your intention. So, in my course, I talk about, I have like, the way you can make visuals is to be cool as ice. And ice stands for intention, capture, and examine. And you set your intention when you were talking about, okay, I want my selective attention to be on this particular piece of content. I'm going to put it into my subconscious by capturing it. And I'm going to go about my day and continue to consume or write or engage with the world. And by having that intention, by you doing that exertion, that's what contributes to the quality of the ideas that you have. I think for us, as we are somewhere in between, where we've already had the physical reps, and now AI is able to kind of help us to save time, we're going to have a different relationship with AI than people who are starting, who will actually not need to bridge that gap. They start here. And I think there's something lost in that. It's like
skipping a step.
Yeah, it's like a challenging thing to think about, because what are we losing and what problems are we solving, but what problems are we creating? And that is essentially, I think, is going to be a different relationship with the tool, depending on what stage you are in how much creative work you've done. Because I think that struggle, that feeling of like, what should I create a visual about, or what should I write about, and then trying to structure it, even if you only do it a handful of times, it's an incredibly valuable exercise, because it's in that struggle that we learn. You don't learn things by people handing it to you. And I mean, that's just my experience as a teacher and being in the 20th year of teaching. Like, if I just, even in a simple thing, like, Mr. Milani, I don't know how to do this one thing on the software. I found if I go walk over there and I say it, and I just point to it, and I say, this is where it is, click here, click here, click here, they will ask me again in like 20 minutes, or maybe the next day. Small adjustment. If I walk over there and I say, look for this. Okay, take a look at what you have in front of you. Which one of those things you think might work? It takes a good like 30 seconds. They'll figure it out. I'm like, that's what you do. That small little pivot, that small little tension that you create, they learn it. They won't ask me again. So that's what we're eliminating if we use AI too strongly early on in the wrong stage of our creative cycle of developing, I guess, into a more creative soul. If you're using it for business, if you're using it to just mass produce, that's a different relationship. But for me personally, as someone who wants to encourage people to have creativity as a practice, it's the equivalent of like taking a picture on your phone and then saying, look what I created, versus somebody who's drawn something from scratch and drawn an illustration of you. And you're like, they're two different things involving they both created a lifelike image, but one involves a different set of skills. If you're outcome focused, it's going to be a very different thing. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of a long, just a way of saying it.
Absolutely, that answers part of the question. By the way, how are you seeing video? I think I have some issue with the connection. Perhaps, do you see me all right?
Yeah, I see you on the live. I think so. Okay. It looks like you're
What I hear, which is really interesting, I didn't think about this, is that it depends on the stage you are. And if you are on a certain stage, you can use the tools knowing that you already have the basis. But then if you're doing this for the first time, perhaps it's taking out part of the learning. And this reminds me one thing that you told me, that in your visual, you want always the people to do one little step, or at least try to put something on their own. And this is like not not giving everything, as you said,
Right.
30
Yes.
seconds, that, what does this? Okay. Because if they do some work, they make it their own. If
Yes.
everything prepared is not their own.
Yeah. Yeah. The analogy I use is, it's the equivalent of like, most people think when they need to express an idea or communicate an idea to someone visually at the very least is, let's say the analogy is we draw a circle. And most people think, okay, I need to draw the full circle for my audience and so that they see the circle. And my argument is, as the creators, what we do is we create the circle, but we leave a little bit at the edge of that circle, that gap. And that gap is where our audience comes in and fills that gap. That's what I call the curiosity gap. Because if we involve the audience into our visual, we invite them then into the visual to come up with their own interpretation, where they become an active participant versus a passive one.
And we have a conversation. It's not
Exactly.
it's not like shouting things out and see what bounces and what not. It's like, yeah, and I love this that you said, because actually many very interesting things came out from comments in my post, and I had books recommendation, articles, new illustration, and a lot of inspiration from the images. And actually, when I do some repurposing of things from whatever 6 months ago or 3 months ago, whatever, I check the comment and say, oh wow, this is very interesting, and I edit the next time based on the comment. So it's iterative, and it's thanks to this interaction. So
Yeah.
100% with that, and it's a great way to put it. The circle, I will remember the circle. So, by the way, now that we talk about it's 38, I don't know if there are questions, but perhaps with this last reflection, which is a very nice way to wrap up and to invite the people who will be watching this or who are listening now to join the conversation. One more thing, PJ, how can we reach you, or are there any other things we can follow from you out there?
Well, for me, is the best way to keep tabs of what I'm doing like on a weekly basis is probably my newsletter. I'm not a full I don't trust social media to get content to the people who are interested in seeing the content, because the way the algorithm works, there's all kinds of data that shows, okay, such a small percentage of the people that follow you actually are presented with the work that you publish. So I think a newsletter is something that is a must for probably any creator who is wanting to make sure that their content is seen by the people that are interested in their content. Yeah. So I have a visual ideas newsletter that I release every 2 weeks. I try not to make it too spammy, or so I don't spam at all, but I usually have like 4 visuals. Ideas is like interesting, design, enchanting, and analogy. And it's a pretty short email that I send every couple weeks. And of course, there's my course, Thinking in Visual Metaphors. I partnered with Maven to teach that for the last 2 cohorts. So yeah, those would be my 2. I'm actually just seeing there are questions in here. I was like, wow, there are questions in here. I don't know if you're interested in looking at
okay, I didn't see that, but let's shoot. Where is that? Ah, here. Yeah, now I see that. Just manage. Where do we start?
I'm looking at the bottom. Nadine asks a question for both of you. What has changed for you in your daily life since becoming, well, I wouldn't say I'm famous, but becoming famous on social media? Do you even feel famous, and do you feel successful? What an interesting question.
Oh, that's
Roberto, what do you think?
Okay, first of all, hi Nadine, pleasure to be here with you. What's changed? I think I don't feel like famous. What I feel is like it's amazing to see how when you put out the things you like, it somehow attracts other people who likes the same stuff. And there is amazing way to say that, and probably I already said a few times, which is your vibe attracts your tribe, and this is something that I really believe in. And it's the beautiful part of communicating online. You just have to put out the thing that you like, and if someone doesn't like it, okay, no problem. But if they like it, they will probably connect. And I do the same. When I see something that I like, I also reach out. So this has also changed the way I interact with other people. I just don't look at something and say, okay, this is nice. If I really think it's good stuff, I just connect with the person. And this is so satisfying because we have a conversation then. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the question being, what has changed for you? And I would say not a whole lot has changed for me personally, other than being able to have the opportunity to connect with interesting folks like yourself. Outside of that, not a whole lot has changed for me just psychologically, because for me, it's really about that creative practice, like you might have mentioned. And I think I was interviewed in this Twitter space a little while ago, and somebody had brought up this point about, let's say you have however many thousands of followers and you're not happy doing the thing that you're doing, but you want to explore this other thing, but you feel like you have to create this particular kind of content in order to maintain your presence or however many followers, whatever, because they know you for this thing. And I was very strong in my opinion in that change the thing. Like, if you're not doing it for some kind of creative, and I am, again, I'm not trying to change my careers. There's a difference, right? I'm doing this as an additional thing that I think is fun for me. It's meaningful to me, and I want to encourage other people to do creative things. So that's different than somebody who's like, I built business around this thing. Yes, in that case, maybe you need to stick to what it is that you've specialized in.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I think nothing has changed because, like you said, and I have a visual about this, and I use it in the course at the end, which is a little flow chart, which is, you publish today, people like it, or people don't like it, you publish again tomorrow. And if you have that mindset, then it frees you. It's very liberating. Whereas if you're concerned about, if you start thinking, oh, I'm famous, which I'm not, but I appreciate it. I don't feel famous. So to answer the other question, I don't feel necessarily famous. But if you start thinking about it, oh, I have to create a specific type of content, then you limit yourself to think more interestingly. There are times when I'm like, I've created something and I'm like, I hesitate putting it out because I'm like, oh, I don't know if it'll do well. And then I catch myself and I'm like, what the hell are you thinking? Stop it. Post the work. It doesn't matter, because tomorrow you're going to do another one. And by having that daily creative practice, you don't put any level of weight on any one thing, because you're like, if something does well, I've had posts that I haven't done really well at all, but I still like it. I still enjoy making it. And I know, again, tomorrow I'm going to create something else.
Not having expectations, not being tied to the expectation. This have to do this or have to do that. It's like, okay, it's just for fun and for yourself. Yeah,
I think it's a healthy approach, to be sure.
Yeah. Is there any other question? Let's see. Okay, I have one question. We can do, by the way, PJ, we are out of time. Can you go a little bit more to answer the question, or we can just
sure.
answer the,
No, I'm good.
Torben is asking, what rituals are a trampoline to your creativity? Okay, maybe I can answer first. I don't have any ritual. So it's more what we discussed before. It's like the habit of noting and noticing and just writing down everything and putting into the backlog. This helps a lot. And this just takes out a lot of the pressure to, I have to be creative. No, I just have to write down the things that interest me. And then when I want to do something, I read into my backlog and pick what looks like more interesting and fun at this moment. So
Mm.
it's really much more about having fun and doing something that it's meaningful at this moment than not having to do this. What about you, PJ?
Yeah, I think I've found anytime I'm reading a newsletter, funny enough, anytime I'm reading a newsletter, ideas just spark from for me. And maybe it's because the people I've selected to read their newsletters, I and I select people that talk in stories and are rich in the writing with the metaphors that they use to kind of present their ideas. I found that to be highly enriching, and it like feeds the creative soul, right? Like, and reading, again, like consuming things, the quote, you're the average, from Jim Rohn, very famous quote, you're the average of the 5 people that you spend most time with.
Yeah.
I think you're the average of the 5 pieces of content that you consume. So so like if you're consuming content that is perhaps maybe not rich in the ideas that they're presenting, and it's not to say that there's not a place and time and place for that, but if that is the case, then sometimes that may stunt some of your creativity if your goal is to be more creative. So if the goal is to be creative, I think it's important to preserve the circle of content that you consume, because again, all of that feeds into your energy. And another thing that's funny enough is, I've been asked, and you will probably resonate with this. Like, I mean, we both have young kids, right? And it's like, how do you manage doing all of this with young kids? And that's part of the reason why I do more visuals than I do writing now, because I can sit down next to my kids and draw and I can stop in the middle of drawing, get them some milk, get them some snacks, whatever, or or play a game of Uno.
And you can ask them feedback on the visual also.
Well, this is what's great, because we're also teaching our children, like, we're engaging in creative practice, and they become curious about that, and that's recharging to me too, because both my sons actually will draw versions of my visuals. and it's like the most adorable thing, because my youngest may not spell things correctly, and the control of the pen is not precise, but you can see my visual interpreted through a 6-year-old's eyes, and it's just the sweetest little thing. And that's, again, really recharging. And then my youngest son is like, when are you going to do a Mega Man? Have you done a Mega Man one yet? Or like, what about Sonic? Can you draw Sonic? What about Friday Night Funkin'? Like, he's telling me like what I need to create a metaphor using whatever context that he's thinking. So those things are, funny enough, very recharging for me, because it's like they're engaged in creativity with me. And so that makes it all the more like, this is a good thing to do. It's a healthy thing to do. And it's a fulfilling thing to do.
Yeah. Sounds familiar. Okay, let's check if we have some more questions. Someone says it's audio only. Well, perhaps we have some issue with the video. We'll see.
Oh no. Whoops.
Make fun. Thank you. Mental training. Yeah. AI. The rituals, the roaming.
Oh, Adrian, I see a comment from Adriano. He asked, what are the main tools or apps you use?
Okay, well, I think each one of us uses a different one, but I would say depends on your preferences. The tool is not the basic. Still, perhaps there are two different ways. One is on vectors, and the other one was Raster or Pixel. I use Vector and I use Affinity Designer, but there is also Figma, which is good. The thing that I like about Affinity is that one thing is Vector, you can reuse everything. So when you start to have 100, 200, or even 30, you can take one thing from one place, repurpose it, change the colors, change a little bit, and then you iterate. That's really fun. And at the same time, Figma, I know people who just use Figma and they do amazing work. And what do you do? What do you use, PJ?
I use Procreate, which is a great one-time purchase. It is on the iPad, so there is that side to it. And I was asked actually one of the questions that a student asked yesterday in the cohort that I was teaching. One of the students asked like final questions was about Adobe Illustrator compared to something like a Figma or Procreate. And I grew up with Adobe software. Like since I was in high school, I've been using Adobe software, Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, all those. And I use it to teach in my classroom. The downside of using that software to start is that you can easily get caught up in learning the tool instead of using the tool. And where you're learning something initially, as far as on the thinking side of things, I think it's helpful to eliminate as much of learning the tool as possible early on. You can, of course, if you go through the same problem over and over and over again, and you're like, is there an easier way to do this? You could do a little search, spend 5 minutes to learn that particular aspect of the software. But something like a tool that has so much versatility also has additional complexity, and that can limit what you're thinking about when you engage with creating content or creating anything. Absolutely. So for me, Procreate was great because it eliminated really too much having to worry about tools. I actually absolutely start everything with pen and paper. And there's a lot of argument to be made on using just a pen and paper. Sure, it's harder to recycle assets, but as far as on the thinking side of things, that can be incredibly useful. Yeah, to just you're getting cycled through. Yeah, exactly. It's a full rep. And so I encourage people to don't focus too much on the tools, but I understand oftentimes when you see stuff like this, you're like, what tool are they using? Is that AI? Is that something on PowerPoint that I'm not unfamiliar with? Like, I understand the initial desire to learn the tool, and I think the tools are important eventually, but early on, I think you can just use pen and paper. Affinity Designer is great, Figma is great, Procreate is great. Even using something like a PowerPoint. I know Jeff, remember Jeff?
Absolutely.
He did PowerPoint. He used PowerPoint to create visuals.
The circles, and it was amazing. Wow,
it was great. And he spent hours upon hours drawing like a Yoda or something on PowerPoint. And I was like, oh my God, how much time did this take? So yeah, again, the tool is just a vehicle for you to get your ideas on crystallized and
absolutely. And I would add just one thing, which 100% agree with you. And I would add that when you already have been using a tool for a time, perhaps to stop a moment and say, okay, what am I doing really a lot of times? Right. Because if you do something 100 times a week or 100 times a month, maybe it's worth to invest a little bit time to see if there is a better way. And there is a fun story because, by the way, thank you, Alex. Alex asked me a question and she said, how can I join curves in Affinity Designer, because also he uses Affinity Designer, and I didn't know how to do it because I usually used single curves and joined them as a group, and then Google in 5 minutes and I find a way to merge the curves and do amazing thing. And I said, how could I live 2 years without this?
Right.
So it's a balance between just jumping in and perhaps at a certain point do some research and speed up the process, because there are, as you said, tons of features and you get overwhelmed and it's so easy to get lost in the tool. and not focus on the process, which is really the important. But at the same time, there are really easy tweaks that you can find in 5 minutes. So
yeah, you bring up a good point. It's like, yeah, I have the same thing happen all the time in Procreate as well. But it's also like you had to go through it to understand how amazing
exactly
this new way of doing it, which would have saved you time. You're like, oh, but if you had spent all the, I found just in case knowledge is rarely effective. Just in the nick of time is always effective. So it's like getting that just in nick of time knowledge and experience with a tool can be incredibly powerful. But if I told you in the very beginning how to use that software, and that was part of like 100 other things on learning the software, you wouldn't have valued it as much and maybe understood why it was so important to use it. So yeah, there's a balancing act to be sure.
Amazing. Okay, so wow, it's already 1 hour. I think we can go on for 3 hours more, but I think if there are more questions, we can just answer in the chat. I know it's in Texas now. It's almost 11 o'clock in the morning, right? Perhaps
it's 10. It's 10 now. We're getting closer to 10 in the morning, so we're good. Yeah.
So now the kids are just finished watching TV. So
that's right. We need to get on with the day.
Yeah, let's go on. It's been a pleasure to talk to you again.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the people who joined in. Thank you for the question. If we missed something, we will answer in the post. And so super fun. I hope.
Yeah, man. And thank you so much, Roberto, for organizing this. Like you are, like I've said, you are the man when it comes to setting stuff up and like executing it. You guys don't see it, but there were like Notion documents within Notion documents. You think like, oh, I'll just join this live conversation and just hop in. And you're like, no, man, like Roberto is like this mastermind that like, he just gets everything, together. He's like Minority Report, Tom Cruise, just doing everything together so that we can just relax. So I could just come in and relax and just have a conversation. So thank you for setting this up. And thank you everyone who's joined us today. I'm sorry, we're not super tech savvy in the sense of like being able to figure out where all the comments are. So if we miss a question, hopefully we'll be able to catch it afterwards. But thanks again, Roberto. It's been super fun. And hopefully we'll get the chance to do this again.
Amazing. Thank you. Let's just end the stream here. Bye-bye.